Across the vast plains where the wind whispers forgotten secrets, a child found in a barrel would forever change the fate of a Comanche warrior haunted by his losses. Tahu had never imagined that a simple necklace, gleaming in the golden light of sunset, would reveal ties deeper than blood. The warm afternoon wind kicked up clouds of red dust across the wide-open spaces where Tahu rode in silence. His black hair, braided with eagle feathers, danced to the rhythm of his stallion's gallop. Deep solitude mirrored in his dark eyes, carved out by years of mourning and unforgiving traditions. He was riding back from a solo hunt in the hills, his empty quiver a testament to an unfruitful day. Game had been scarce ever since sickness hit his tribe, taking not only his beloved wife and only son, but also the fragile balance between people and nature. A pungent smell broke through his melancholic thoughts. Smoke. Tahu listened closely and picked up the ominous crackle of burning wood. His heart tightened. Out in these lands, smoke often meant death or destruction. He spurred his horse and followed the scent trail to a clearing where the remains of a caravan lay scattered like the bones of a devoured animal. Armed white men lay unconscious near a gutted wagon, their faces marked by violence and greed. That's when he heard it, a muffled sob, fragile as the cry of a fallen nestling. Tahu dismounted and cautiously approached an overturned barrel. Inside, curled up like a wilting flower, was a little girl with wide, terror-stricken eyes. Her tangled hair framed a dirty but determined face. Around her neck hung a necklace of beads and stones, adorned with a symbol Tahu recognized right away, the protective spirit revered by his people. How could this child of the White Lands wear such a talisman? Without a word, as their tongues didn't understand each other, Tahu extended his calloused hand to the little one. She hesitated for a moment, then accepted this unexpected offer of refuge. The warrior lifted her onto his horse, feeling her trembling body against his chest, and they set off for the Comanche village, leaving behind the mysteries of a destroyed caravan and the first seeds of an intertwined destiny. The Comanche village spread out like a circle of ochre teepees under the glowing twilight sky. White smoke drifted lazily from the fires, carrying the comforting smell of stew and dried herbs. But when Tahu crossed the camp's boundaries with the child, a heavy silence replaced the evening chatter. All eyes turned to them, some filled with curiosity, others with suspicion. An old woman spat in the dust and turned her eyes away. A group of young warriors exchanged uneasy whispers. The little girl pressed closer to Tahu, instinctively sensing the hostility around her. "Who is this child of the pale faces?" asked Ayana, one of the council elders, her voice sharp as a blade. Her gray hair was adorned with raven feathers, and her piercing eyes scrutinized the stranger with suspicion. Tahu dismounted and gently helped the little girl to the ground. She wavered on her trembling legs, gripping his hand like a lifeline in a storm. "I found her alone, abandoned near a destroyed caravan," he explained in a calm but firm voice. "The spirits guided my steps to her." Chief Kia stepped forward, his imposing stature casting a long shadow in the dying light. His arms crossed. His stern expression left no doubt about his feelings. "The spirits have tested us enough already, Tahu. Why bring a stranger among us?" The little girl timidly looked up at the faces around her. Her fingers instinctively closed around her necklace, and in that gesture, Tahu glimpsed a spark of determination that contrasted with her apparent fragility. "Look," he whispered, pointing to the talisman. "She wears our sacred symbol." A ripple went through the assembly. Nalnish, the shaman, limped closer, his bones creaking with each step. He examined the necklace carefully, his milky eyes reflecting ancestral wisdom. "It truly is the protective spirit," he confirmed slowly. "But how can a white child possess such an object?" The little girl, understanding they were talking about her necklace, brought her hand to her chest and uttered a few words in a language no one recognized immediately. Then, with clumsy but sincere gestures, she mimed the action of riding a horse, pointing toward the horizon and touching her talisman again. A murmur of astonishment passed through the crowd. Only those who had grown up with horses could replicate those movements so naturally. "She knows our customs," Tahu observed, a note of hope breaking through in his hoarse voice. Kiya frowned, visibly troubled. The evening wind picked up, making the teepee hides flap like the wings of giant birds. In this sonic ballet, Everyone seemed to ponder the mystery of this child who had fallen from the sky. Dawn broke like a golden wound on the horizon, and with it the discovery that would change everything. Tahu had spent the night sitting by the dying fire, watching over the sleeping child in his teepee. She had spoken in her sleep, scattered words in a language he didn't understand, but sprinkled with familiar sounds. When she awoke, her eyes still clouded with troubled dreams, Tahu offered her a bowl of fresh water. As she drank, she murmured a few words that made the warrior start. Abuela, Apache. Tahu's heart began to beat faster. Apache. He knew that language. Those warrior cousins with whom his people had sometimes fought, sometimes allied. Gently, with the few Apache words he knew, he tried to communicate with her. The little girl's eyes lit up with a new sparkle. Like a dam breaking, words began to flow, a mix of Spanish, Apache, and expressive gestures. Her name was Luna. Her grandmother, an Apache married to a Mexican, had taught her the old traditions before she died. The necklace was a legacy from this wise woman who had taught her to read the signs in the sky and respect the spirits of nature. She has Apache blood, Tahu announced to the council that had gathered in the shade of the great oak. Her grandmother passed our customs on to her. Kiya, his face crisscrossed with deep, canyon-like wrinkles, shook his head in disbelief. How can we be certain? Children tell a lot of stories. But Nalnish the shaman watched Luna with new interest. Show us what your grandmother taught you, little one, he said in a mix of Apache and gestures. Luna straightened up, her small hands trembling but determined. She approached the central fire, took a handful of red earth, and drew symbols on the ground, interlocking circles, wavy lines representing wind and water, stylized animal shapes. Then looking up at the morning sky, she pointed east, murmuring a prayer in perfect Apache. A respectful silence fell over the assembly. Even the children stopped playing to observe this unexpected display of ancestral knowledge. These signs, Ayana murmured, her usually sharp voice softened by surprise. My own grandmother taught them to me. Luna turned to Tahu and held out her necklace. In the morning light, the protective spirit symbol seemed to pulse with life. She spoke a few words in Spanish, then repeated in Apache. The spirits had led her to him, to her new family. The warm wind swept through the camp, kicking up golden dust spirals around the kneeling little girl. In this luminous swirl, Tahu had a fleeting vision of a future where two worlds might coexist. But Kiya remained skeptical. Apache blood isn't enough. She's still an outsider who brings the white people's troubles with her. We must decide her fate. The council stretched on until the sun reached its zenith, its merciless rays turning the earth into a blazing inferno. Voices rose and fell like waves in an ocean of anger and uncertainty. Some spoke of broken tradition, others of signs sent by the ancestors. Kiya finally raised his tattooed hand, commanding silence. His dark eyes swept across the assembly before settling on Tahu. 7 days, he declared in a voice that carried the weight of generations of wisdom. In 7 days we will vote. If the majority agrees, the child stays. Otherwise, she will be returned to the white people. A shiver ran through the attendees despite the crushing heat. 7 days to decide the fate of a soul. 7 days to change closed hearts or confirm rejection. Luna, who didn't understand all the words but grasped the gravity of the moment perfectly, clutched her necklace tighter against her chest. Tahu placed a protective hand on her fragile shoulder. In the meantime, the chief continued, she will live under your roof, Tahu. You answer for her actions. The days that followed were a silent trial. Luna walked through the village like a shadow, aware of the gazes that followed her, some hostile, others simply curious. The children watched her from afar, whispering among themselves without daring to approach. Tahu tried to involve her in daily activities. He showed her how to braid herbs to strengthen ropes, how to choose the perfect stones for sharpening arrowheads, how to read animal tracks in the red earth. Luna learned with touching eagerness, her small hands mimicking each gesture with a precision that hinted at prior instruction. On the third day, as she was helping Winona, one of the weavers, prepare fibers for a new rug, Luna did something unexpected. Instead of following the traditional Comanche pattern, she mixed techniques, intertwining the strands according to Apache patterns she had learned from her grandmother. The result was striking, a fabric where the two cultures blended into an unprecedented harmony, creating new forms that spoke of unity rather than division. Winona gazed at the work, troubled. "It's beautiful," she admitted reluctantly. "But it's neither Comanche nor Apache." "It's new," Luna gently corrected in her hesitant Apache, then repeated in Spanish before touching her necklace. "Like me." That night, the wind picked up with unusual force, making the teepee hides moan. In this wild symphony, Tahu's dreams were filled with visions. His departed wife and son smiled at him, and between them stood a dark-haired little girl wearing a necklace shining like a star. When he awoke, he knew the spirits had spoken, but convincing them would be harder than interpreting their messages. The fourth day brought with it an electrical tension that seemed to make the very air hum. Luna had woken before dawn, startled from sleep by muffled cries and unusual movements in the camp. The dogs barked nervously, their ears pricked toward the surrounding hills. Tahu emerged from his teepee, all his senses on high alert. In the bluish gloom of early morning, he spotted a stumbling figure approaching the village, one of the tribe's scouts, Dakota, whose horse was limping and whose side was bleeding heavily. They're coming," the man gasped, collapsing near the central fire. His hands trembled as he tried to bandage his wound with a torn cloth. The white men, armed, they're lurking in the hills. A crowd quickly formed around the wounded warrior. Kiya hurried over, his face grim, closely followed by the shaman Nalnish and several elders. Luna, driven by an intuition she didn't fully grasp herself, approached despite the disapproving glances. "How many are there?" the chief asked in a tense voice. "About 10, maybe more. They're wearing the same clothes as those near the destroyed wagon," Dakota replied between grimaces of pain. The eyes of several villagers immediately turned to Luna. In their gazes, she read a silent accusation. She was the cause of this danger. Her presence had drawn the vultures, but something in her refused to be overwhelmed by that guilt. She had watched her grandmother treat the wounded with herbal mixtures and natural salves. Without asking permission, she knelt beside Dakota and examined his wound. "Puedo ayudar?" she murmured in Spanish, then repeated in hesitant Apache. The wounded warrior looked at her with astonishment. Despite his initial suspicion, the pain prompted him to nod. Luna disappeared for a few moments and returned with a handful of herbs she had gathered during her walks with Tahu, plants her grandmother had taught her to recognize. With precise, confident movements, she chewed some leaves to release their juices, mixed them with damp clay, and applied this poultice to the wound. Dakota let out a sigh of relief as the pain lessened. "How?" Nalnish began, impressed despite himself by the little girl's knowledge. "Mi abuela," Luna replied simply, touching her necklace. "She taught me." Winona, who had witnessed the scene, murmured, "Healing spirits flow in her veins." But the momentary improvement in opinion couldn't hide the terrifying reality. The mercenaries who had been chasing her hadn't given up. They were out there, somewhere in the hills, like hungry wolves stalking their prey. The morning wind carried a scent of dust and danger, and in its breath everyone understood that the 7 days of deliberation might have just dramatically shortened. The following hours passed in an atmosphere of escalating tension. The entire village seemed to hold its breath, every gaze scanning the horizon for menacing signs. The women discreetly gathered essential provisions, while the warriors checked their weapons with methodical precision. Luna felt the weight of silent accusations pressing down on her fragile shoulders. She had become a burden, a danger to these people who had welcomed her with such reluctance. But Tahu kept his eyes on her, watching over her like a wolf protects its cub. By mid-afternoon, a group of hunters galloped back, their faces etched with worry. Their leader, a man with a scar-barred chest named Chaitin, dismounted with a leap and headed straight for Kiya. "The Red River trading post was attacked," he announced without preamble. His voice carried the gravity of one who had seen destruction up close. Everything was ransacked, goods stolen, buildings burned. A murmur of dread swept through the assembly that had spontaneously formed. The trading post was a neutral place, respected by all tribes and settlers. Attacking it was tantamount to declaring war on everyone. "Are there any survivors?" Nalnish asked. his gnarled hands clutching his shaman's staff. A few escaped and took refuge in the woods. They speak of armed, organized men, led by a clear-eyed chief who wore... Chaitin hesitated, then pulled a torn, blood-stained piece of cloth from his pouch. On the coarse fabric was embroidered a symbol, a star surrounded by snakes, identical to the one Tahu had seen on the unconscious mercenary's clothes near the wagon. A deathly silence fell over the camp. All eyes turned to Luna, who instinctively recoiled, her necklace shimmering in the golden afternoon light. "It's her!" a voice suddenly cried out, that of a young warrior named Ayana. "She led them to us. Her presence brings death." Other voices joined his, creating an accusatory chorus that made the little girl tremble. But in the midst of this storm of anger, a voice rose with quiet authority. "Enough." Takota, the wounded warrior Luna had tended to, rose with difficulty. His wound still made him wince, but his voice was firm. "This child saved me. She possesses the gift of healing. How can she bring death when she gives life?" Winona nodded, supporting his words. "I've seen her work. Her hands carry the spirit's blessing." But opinion remained divided. The warm, plain wind picked up, stirring up reddish dust devils that seemed to dance around Luna like angry spirits. Kiya gazed at the blood-stained cloth, then at the little girl who stood straight despite her fear. "The evil pursuing her has found us," he said slowly. "The question is no longer whether she can stay. It's whether we can all survive her presence." Night fell like a black veil over the agitated village. Campfires burned lower than usual, everyone avoiding drawing attention to their position. Luna sat close to Tahu, wrapped in a wool blanket that couldn't warm the cold chilling her heart. She now understood the gravity of her situation. These men who had been chasing her never gave up. They were like predators following a blood trail to their prey no matter the obstacles. And now, the entire village risked paying the price for her presence. "Tahu," she whispered in her mix of Apache and Spanish. Maybe I should leave." The warrior turned his dark eyes toward her, where the dying fire's reflections danced. In those depths, she read a tenderness she hadn't seen since her grandmother's death. "The spirits never give us more than we can carry," he replied softly. "And they never send us someone without a reason. At the heart of this uncertainty that grips us all, one question remains. What does destiny hold for this child caught between two worlds? If this story touches you as much as it moves us, don't hesitate to subscribe to our channel to discover the rest of this extraordinary adventure that's just beginning." A piercing cry suddenly tore through the night silence. The village dogs began to bark furiously, their voices forming an alarm chorus that chilled everyone's blood. In the distance, orange flames danced against the starry sky. Something was burning in the hills. Tahu sprang to his feet, his hand instinctively finding the handle of his tomahawk. "They're attacking the outposts," he growled between clenched teeth. Within minutes, the village transformed into a military beehive. Warriors donned their war paint, women hid the children in underground shelters, and elders prepared the last defenses. Luna watched this perfect orchestration of survival, admiring, despite her fear, the coordination of these people accustomed to danger. That's when she noticed something strange. Black Eagle, one of the oldest warriors in the village, was kneeling near a stream that bordered the camp. In his wrinkled hands he held an ancient, beautifully crafted bow, its wood appearing almost black in the moonlight. The weapon was half submerged, threatened by the current that had strengthened with recent rains. Black Eagle was trying to retrieve it, but his old bones no longer allowed him the agile movements of his youth. Without thinking, Luna rushed to him. She plunged her small hands into the icy water and managed to grab the bow before it was swept away by the current. The weapon was heavy, laden with history and spiritual power. "Thank you, little one," Black Eagle murmured, his eyes moist with gratitude. "This bow belonged to my father and his father before him. You've just saved 3 generations of memory." In this simple gesture, Luna had just touched the heart of a man who, until then, had looked at her with suspicion. And around them, others had witnessed the scene, silent witnesses to this humanity that transcended cultural barriers. The dawn of the 6th day broke under a sky heavy with menacing clouds, as if the heavens themselves sensed the coming storm. The air was thick with electricity, and every breath seemed to carry the pungent smell of gunpowder and danger. Luna hadn't slept all night. She had remained sitting by the dying fire, her necklace clutched in her small hands, murmuring the prayers her grandmother had taught her. Apache words flowed from her lips like a protective litany, calling on the ancestral spirits to watch over these people who had taken her in. When Tahu emerged from his teepee, he found her like this, her eyes red-rimmed from tears and fatigue. Around her, several tribe members had gathered, Dakota with his bandaged wound, Winona holding her loom, Black Eagle caressing his saved bow, and even some of those who had accused her the day before. "She prays for us," Nalnish whispered respectfully. "For hours, she has been invoking protection over our village." This revelation struck Tahu like a blow to the heart. This child, who could have fled into the night to escape the accusations and the danger she represented, had chosen to stay and pray for the safety of those who still doubted her. Suddenly, riders emerged from the morning mist. They were scouts who had returned in haste, their horses frothing with sweat and fatigue. Their leader, Mape, leaped from his mount, his face etched with urgency. "They're coming," he cried without preamble. "The armed men, they'll be here before the sun reaches its zenith." Their leader, the one with the clear eyes, he said he was coming to retrieve his property. An icy shiver ran through the assembly. Luna recoiled instinctively, understanding that she was this property being claimed. But before she could flee or hide, Tahu placed his hand firmly on her shoulder. "No one here is anyone's property," he declared in a voice that boomed like thunder. "If they want the child, they'll have to go through us first." Kiya stepped forward, his stone face finally revealing deep emotion. "The vote was planned for tomorrow, but circumstances have decided for us." He looked Luna straight in the eyes, then swept his gaze across the assembly. "She who protects our village with her prayers already belongs to our family." A murmur of approval rose from the crowd. Even those who had opposed her nodded with new resolve. Luna felt her heart clench with a mix of gratitude and terror. "But how can we defend ourselves?" a woman asked anxiously. "They're armed with rifles and pistols." Tahu smiled for the first time in days, a smile that didn't reach his eyes but revealed the determination of tempered steel. "They don't know our land. They don't understand our ways, and most of all," he gently stroked Luna's hair, "they underestimate what we're fighting for." The wind suddenly picked up, snapping the banners and stirring up prophetic dust whirls. In this wild dance of the elements, everyone understood that the hour of judgment had arrived. The seventh day dawned under a steel sky, heavy with black clouds rolling like menacing waves above the plains. The air was so thick you could almost touch it, charged with an electricity that made the hairs on your neck stand up and made the horses skittish. Luna woke before dawn, her heart pounding with a premonition she couldn't shake. It was supposed to be the day of the vote, but instead it would be the day of battle. She touched her necklace, seeking in that familiar gesture the strength of her departed grandmother. Preparations were in full swing in the village. Tahu orchestrated the defense with the precision of an experienced war chief. He divided his men into two strategic groups. The first, led by Chaitin, would position themselves at the village's outskirts to slow the mercenaries' advance, using the rough terrain to their advantage. Tree trunks were dragged to form natural barricades, camouflaged pits dug at key passages. The second group, under Dakota's command despite his recent injury, would circle around the hills to attack from the rear and cut off the assailants' retreat. The objective wasn't to slaughter them, but to neutralize and capture them. "We are not murderers," Tahu reminded his warriors. "We protect what is ours." Women and children were evacuated to the sacred caves, with the exception of Luna, who categorically refused to leave. "My place is here," she declared with a determination that surprised even Tahu. "They're coming because of me. I won't hide." Around noon, the dogs began to whine and pace. Their keen senses picked up what humans hadn't yet perceived. Then, like a distant roll of thunder, the pounding of hooves grew audible. "They're coming," Mape whispered from his observation post. On the horizon, a line of riders emerged from the heat haze, their silhouettes rippling like evil mirages. At the head rode a fair-haired man whose cold eyes gleamed with ruthless determination, Elias Crow, the mercenary leader. "Give us the girl," he shouted, his voice carrying to the heart of the village. "She belongs to us. Her family owes us money." Tahu stepped forward alone to the edge of the camp. His imposing stature and natural pride commanded respect, even from a distance. "This child is under our protection," he replied in a voice like thunder. "Leave now and no harm will come to you." Elias Crow let out a joyless laugh that echoed like a vulture's cry. "You don't understand, Redskin. This little one is worth a lot of gold, and we never leave empty-handed." The wind suddenly rose, violent and harsh, whipping up red dust whirls that danced between the two camps like war spirits. In this wild gust, Luna felt her necklace vibrate against her chest, as if ancestral spirits were whispering encouragement to her. The battle was about to begin. The silence that followed was more deafening than any war cry. For an instant, suspended in time, the two sides gauged each other, like predators assessing their prey. Then Elias Crow raised his right arm, and all hell broke loose. The mercenaries charged, howling, their rifles spitting flashes in the stirred-up dust. But Tahu had anticipated their move. At the first gunshot, his warriors burst from their hiding places like ghosts risen from the earth itself. The strategically placed tree trunks forced the riders to tighten their formation, funneling them into narrow passages where nets stretched between rocks awaited them. Several horses bolted, unseating their riders who tumbled into the red dust. Chaitin and his group harassed the vanguard with precise arrows, aiming for legs and arms to neutralize without killing. Every shot was calculated, every movement choreographed by years of combat experience. "Take them alive!" Tahu roared over the din of battle. Meanwhile, Dakota led his troop in a perfect flanking maneuver. They had scaled the hills in the shadow, taking advantage of their intimate knowledge of the terrain to slip behind enemy lines. When they attacked, it was like a thunderclap in a clear sky. The mercenaries, caught in a pincer movement, tried to reform their ranks, but panic spread among their horses. The Comanches used dried herbs they burned to create a thick, acrid smoke that obscured vision and spooked the unaccustomed mounts. In the heart of this confused melee, Elias Crow desperately sought an escape. His cold eyes swept the battlefield until they landed on Luna, who was watching the fight from the village entrance, her necklace gleaming in the gray light. "The kid!" he yelled to his men. "Forget the others, grab the girl." 3 mercenaries broke formation and charged toward Luna. Tahu saw them coming and let out a roar of rage that chilled the blood of all who heard it. But he was too far, engaged in his own fight against 2 opponents. Luna didn't move. Strangely calm, she clutched her necklace and murmured a prayer her grandmother had taught her. At that instant, as if the spirits had heard her call, Black Eagle appeared out of nowhere. The old man, armed with the ancestral bow Luna had saved, loosed 3 arrows in quick succession. Each hit its target in the legs, sending the mercenaries tumbling into the dust without causing fatal injuries. "Nobody touches our little healer," he growled, his old eyes gleaming with fierce fire. The smoke from the burning herbs now enveloped the entire battlefield in a spectral veil. In this orchestrated confusion, the Comanches tightened their grip. The mercenaries, disoriented and separated from their horses, began to throw down their weapons. Elias Crow, seeing the battle turn against him, made one last, desperate attempt to reach Luna. But Tahu was there, emerging like a vengeful spirit from the red smoke, his tomahawk gleaming in his hand. The confrontation between Tahu and Elias Crow was brief but intense. In the swirling smoke that enveloped the battlefield like a living shroud, the 2 men faced each other, one embodying boundless greed, the other fierce protection of innocence. Crow drew his pistol with a trembling hand, but before he could aim, Tahu's tomahawk struck the barrel of the weapon, sending it flying into the dust. With a fluid movement, the Comanche warrior knocked his opponent to the ground and placed his foot on his chest. "It's over," Tahu declared in a voice that resonated with the authority of generations of war chiefs. "Your men are captured. Your weapons are lost. Accept your defeat with honor." Around them, silence gradually fell. The last mercenaries, still standing, threw down their weapons as they saw their companions tied with braided hemp ropes. The smoke slowly dissipated, revealing a striking sight. Not a single dead man lay on the ground, only men wounded in the legs and arms, neutralized by the surgical precision of the Comanche arrows. Elias Crow spat into the red earth, his clear eyes burning with powerless rage. "You don't understand," he gasped. "That kid? Her family owes me over $300. Her father, he borrowed for his farm and died without paying it back. The child is not responsible for her father's debts, Tahu replied with unyielding firmness. Here, she is free. Here, she is protected. Luna slowly approached, her necklace sparkling in the light that finally pierced through the clouds. She looked at Elias Crow with more pity than fear, suddenly understanding that this man was himself a prisoner of his own greed. Mi padre está muerto, she said softly in Spanish, then repeated in broken English. My father, dead. Debt. Not mine. Quilla appeared, accompanied by the Council of Elders. His imposing presence made even Crow step back. Listen to me carefully, white men, he said in a voice that carried the weight of centuries of wisdom. This child has been adopted by our tribe according to our sacred laws. She is now under our protection. If you try to return, we will consider it a declaration of war. The Comanche chief made a gesture, and his warriors began to escort the prisoners toward the territory's boundary. You will be released at the border of our lands. Quilla continued. Your weapons will be returned to you then. But remember this. We know your faces now. Elias Crow struggled to his feet, supported by two warriors. Before leaving, he cast a venomous glance at Luna. This isn't over, kid. The money I'm owed, I'll get it one way or another. But his words rang hollow, stripped of their threat by the crushing defeat he had just suffered. Tahu positioned himself protectively in front of Luna, his message clear. To get to her, they'd have to kill him first. The wind finally calmed, carrying away the last remnants of smoke and dust. In this newfound peace, Luna looked up at Tahu and smiled, a smile that lit up her face like the sun after a storm. The days following the battle were marked by a silent yet profound transformation. The Comanche village had regained its serenity, but something essential had changed in the very air they breathed. Luna was no longer the stranger tolerated out of pity. She had become the child who had prayed for their protection, the one for whom they had risked their lives. The council finally gathered to formalize what the battle had already decided. Under the great oak where so many important decisions had been made, Quilla uttered the ritual words that would make Luna a full member of the tribe. The spirits sometimes speak in mysterious ways, he declared solemnly. They sometimes send us messengers in unexpected forms. This child brought with her the gift of healing and the will to protect her own. She will now be our daughter, our sister, our future guardian of wisdom. The ceremony was simple but moving. Nalnish, the shaman, drew sacred symbols on Luna's forehead with red clay mixed with blessed herbs. Each stroke represented a quality: courage, compassion, loyalty, and connection with ancestral spirits. Then came the most touching moment. Luna removed her necklace, that talisman that had been with her since her grandmother's death, and held it out to Tahu. For you, she said in a mix of Apache and Spanish that was now part of the village's language. You saved me. Now may the spirits protect you too. Tahu accepted the necklace with an emotion he didn't try to hide. In that gesture, he saw far more than a simple gift. It was a father's adoption by his daughter, the recognition of a bond that transcended blood and race. And I give you this, he replied, pulling from his pouch an amulet he had worn since his youth, a polished stone engraved with the eagle symbol, representing freedom and strength. So you never forget that you can fly as high as your dreams will carry you. In the weeks that followed, Luna proved to be the bridge she had always been destined to become. Her knowledge of Spanish and rapid learning of English made her a valuable interpreter when settler delegations came to negotiate trade agreements. She accompanied Tahu to a historic meeting with representatives from the nearest town. There, around a rough wooden table, she translated not only words but also intentions, helping the two peoples understand each other for the first time in generations. This child speaks the language of the heart, observed the mayor, a portly man with gray sideburns. She understands what we mean even before we say it. It was during these negotiations that a crucial piece of information emerged. The town authorities had finally captured Elias Crow's mercenaries. Their leader had been arrested and imprisoned for attacks on trading posts and extortion. The threat hanging over Luna was definitively removed. 6 months later, the plains had donned their autumn colors, and with them, a lasting peace had settled over the region. The Red River trading post had been rebuilt, but this time in cooperation between the Comanche tribe and the colonial authorities. Luna had personally overseen the negotiations, becoming a respected diplomat on both sides by the age of 12. The new trading post had become much more than a simple place of exchange. It was a living symbol of reconciliation. Comanche artisans sold their weavings and jewelry there, while settlers brought tools and goods the tribe couldn't produce. Luna moved between the stalls, translating not only languages but also cultures, explaining each other's traditions to the different groups. "Look," she said to Tahu one morning, pointing to a touching scene near the market entrance. A blonde-haired settler child watched with fascination as a young Comanche carved a bone whistle. Without understanding each other's words, they communicated through gestures and laughter, forging a friendship that transcended all barriers. "That's the future," Tahu murmured, putting his arm around Luna's shoulders. Two peoples learning about each other instead of fearing each other. Luna's necklace, now worn by Tahu, shimmered at his neck in the golden autumn light. It had become the symbol of their reformed family, a solitary warrior who had found purpose again, an orphaned child who had found a home. That day, a special delegation arrived from the territorial capital. It was led by a federal judge who had come to formalize the new agreements between the tribe and the government. Luna translated every clause, every nuance, ensuring both parties fully understood their mutual rights and duties. "Miss Luna," the judge said at the end of the ceremony, "your work today likely prevented years of conflict. You have a rare gift for uniting people." But the finest compliment came from Kiea himself. The old chief approached her as the delegation departed for town and placed his wrinkled hands on her shoulders. "You have become what your Apache grandmother dreamed of," he said with paternal tenderness. "A bridge between worlds, a voice that speaks to all hearts." That evening, around the campfire, Luna recounted her memories of her grandmother to Tahu. She spoke of this wise woman who had taught her that differences between peoples were only surface deep, and deep down, all humans shared the same hopes and fears. "She always told me the spirits send us where we're needed most," Luna confided, looking at the stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. "Now I understand why they led me to you." Tahu smiled, that rare and precious smile he reserved for moments of pure happiness. "And I understand why they kept me alive after losing everything. It was so I could find you." The gentle autumn wind brushed their faces, carrying with it the scent of fallen leaves and the promise of a peaceful winter. A year after her discovery in that abandoned barrel, Luna stood atop the hill overlooking the Comanche village. The spring wind played in her hair, now braided according to tradition, adorned with beads and feathers that told the story of her adoption and accomplishments. Beside her, Tahu gazed at the horizon where their people's teepees and the first wooden homes of settlers who had chosen to settle peacefully on their lands harmoniously mingled. The trading post prospered, becoming a living symbol of coexistence. "Look," Luna murmured, pointing towards the valley. A merchant caravan was approaching, escorted by Comanche warriors and settler guards riding side by side. Grandmother was right. The walls we build in our hearts can crumble when we choose to see the humanity in each other. Tahu nodded, his hand instinctively brushing the necklace Luna had given him. The amulet had become his most precious talisman, not for its spiritual powers but for what it represented: a daughter's love for her adopted father, the absolute trust between two souls fate had brought together. "Sometimes," he said softly, "I wonder if the spirits hadn't planned it all along. Your Apache grandmother teaching you our traditions. The caravan attacked precisely on our territory. Even that necklace bearing our sacred symbols." Luna smiled, that luminous smile that had won the heart of an entire village. "Or maybe the spirits just give us the tools and it's up to us to choose how to use them. I could have stayed paralyzed by fear. You could have sent me back to the white people. But we chose love over fear," Tahu completed. Below, the village children, Comanche and settler mixed, played together near the river. Their crystalline laughter floated up to the hill, carried by the warm wind that heralded summer. Luna watched them with deep tenderness, seeing in them the future she and Tahu had helped build. "Someday," she said dreamily, "these children will grow up without knowing hatred between our peoples. They'll speak our languages as if they were one. They'll respect our traditions as their own." Tahu pulled her close, that paternal gesture he had learned to cherish above all else. "And they'll remember the little girl found in a barrel who changed the course of history." The setting sun painted the sky in shades of orange and purple, transforming the plains into an ocean of golden light. In this natural splendor, Luna and Tahu descended back to the village where the evening fire and the familiar voices of their chosen family awaited them. Did this story touch you as much as it moved us? If you traveled with Luna and Tahu on this extraordinary adventure, don't hesitate to subscribe to our channel to discover other stories that celebrate the beauty of humanity. Leave us a comment to tell us where you're listening from. Your messages from all over the world are our greatest reward. And if this story warmed your heart, give it a like so it can reach other souls in search of hope.